Have you ever stopped to think about what it really takes to build a safe and healthy workplace? I mean, one that works no matter where you are in the world? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on the global gold standard for exactly that, ISO 45001. We're going to break down this super important framework for occupational health and safety. So let's just dive right in.
All right, so here's the plan. First, we'll get into the origin story. Where did this whole thing come from? Then we'll look at the old standard versus the new one. After that, we'll zoom in on the key changes that really matter. And finally, we'll lay out the actual blueprint of the standard so you can see how it's all put together. Okay, first up, the origin story. You know, to really get why ISO 45001 is such a game changer, you have to understand the world before it existed. There was a huge problem. Everyone was doing their own thing, and there was no single unified way to manage workplace safety on a global scale.
So the story really gets going back in 1999 with a British standard called OH&S 18001. Now, this thing was a huge success. Tons of companies used it. But here's the catch. It was never a truly international standard. So the International Organization for Standardization, yep, that's ISO, saw the need for one global language for safety. In 2013, they got to work. And then 5 years later, in 2018, ISO 45001 was officially launched, creating one single benchmark for the entire planet. And that brings us perfectly to our next section, the tale of two standards. Because ISO 45001 wasn't just, a simple software update. It was a complete rethink of how we should approach workplace safety. So how exactly did things change from the old guard to the new?
This is where you can really see the massive shift in thinking. OH&S 18001 was mostly reactive. It was all about hazard control. You find something dangerous, you write a procedure for it. Think of it like putting a safety guard on a machine after someone gets hurt. But ISO 45001, it's proactive. It's about looking ahead, managing risk, and trying to figure out what could go wrong. And it's also about finding opportunities to make things better. It forces safety to be part of the company's DNA, not just some dusty binder on a shelf. And it says leadership has to drive it, with everyone, and I mean everyone, participating. That big picture shift leads us right into the key evolutions. We've seen the general difference, but let's really drill down into the specific concepts that make ISO 45001 such a huge leap forward. So here's the big question, right? What are the most important upgrades? What are the real game-changing ideas that companies had to wrap their heads around? Here are the big four. First, a huge emphasis on leadership. Safety is no longer just the safety manager's problem. Top brass has to own it. Second, this idea of the context of the organization. This means a company can't just look inside its own four walls. It has to consider contractors, supply chains, legal issues, all the outside stuff that affects safety. Third, a much bigger role for worker participation. This recognizes that, hey, the people actually doing the job probably have the best ideas on how to do it safely. And finally, that critical shift we talked about, moving from just controlling dangers to strategically managing both risks and opportunities. All right, last but not least, let's look at the blueprint. I mean, to really use any ISO standard, you have to get its structure. It's kind of like learning the table of contents before you start reading the book. You gotta know the layout. And this is actually one of the smartest things about how modern ISO standards are designed. They all use the same basic 10-clause structure. Now, why does that matter? Well, it's a huge deal for businesses. It means if your company is already certified for quality with ISO 9001, or for environmental stuff with ISO 14001, plugging in this safety system becomes way, way easier. They all speak the same fundamental language. Now, the most important thing to get about this structure is that it's a cycle. It's not a one-and-done checklist. Clauses 1 through 3 basically set the stage. Then you get into the core planning, understanding your world in Clause 4, defining leadership in 5, and planning your moves in 6. Clauses 7 and 8 are the doing phase. This is where you put your plan into action. And then the really crucial part, Clauses 9 and 10, create this feedback loop for checking how you're doing and constantly getting better. It's a system that's designed to learn and evolve. And really, if you want to boil the entire spirit of ISO 45001 down to just one idea, this is it. It's about moving away from a simple don't get hurt mentality. The real goal here isn't just to stop bad things from happening, but to actively make the physical and mental well-being of every single person better. So we've gone through the history, the big changes, and the actual blueprint, but all of that leads us to the most important question of all. How does a framework on a piece of paper
a set of rules and clauses, actually become a real, living, breathing culture of safety out in the real world? That, right there, is the real challenge and the true goal of ISO 45001.